Good morning. Welcome to worship with the community of Westside Unitarian Universalist Church, where compassion leads us to work for justice and equality. My name is Carol Kappa, and I'm your worship leader this morning. I'm glad you're joining us for this service today, and it's my hope that this gathering will renew your sense of community and connection and nourish your heart, mind, and spirit. Thank you to our AV team volunteers today, host Donald Kennard, and co-hosts Janelle Weaver and Jeff Rodriguez. And special thanks to Yuki Kumamoto for selecting and playing beautiful music throughout the service, as well as our loyal director of Lifespan Religious Education, Nikki Kennedy, and her selection and execution of our Time for All Ages. At Westside, we are raising the next generation of Unitarian Universalists, and we want them to know that they are an important part of our community. Several years ago, we chose to be radically inclusive and to adopt a multi-generational worship. Sorry, I just lost my screen here. Where our services include all family members. So welcome to all children and youth. Westside is a community of many beliefs, genders, and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural, racial, class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some here find inspiration in the great books, others in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversations. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. If you're so moved, please enter some information in the chat. You can try out the chat. And by typing some words of welcome to both members and visitors who are joining us this morning. On behalf of this church community, I want to say to everyone, welcome. Today's order of service is a PDF. A link was provided via email and will also be posted in the chat for you to download. As always, please continue to watch your email inbox on Wednesdays for updates on the church programs and opportunities. And so now I invite everyone just to take a nice big deep breath. And from wherever you are, please settle into this sacred space that we created together. Now, let us worship together as we listen to this morning's prelude performed by Yuki Kumamoto. So our opening words are from Reverend Alicia Roxanne Ford, entitled Across a Great Divide. It feels like we are eyeing one another across a great divide, a divide I sometimes call class, race, ethnocentricity, theological perspective, and its implications for how we practice, how we live, how we be. If you be you and I be me, if we speak truth in love, with love, if we act, relate with integrity, if we unite our spirits, open and aching and whole and wanting and giving, then the work we engage, the communities we create, the power of who we can be holds a great promise, a great hope for us and our wider communities. And this matters. Our opening hymn this morning is number 1012, When I Am Frightened, performed by the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore.
I'm Cindy Fountain, and I'm the chalice lighter this morning. Please join me by lighting your chalice at home if you wish. This flaming chalice is our Unitarian Universalist symbol of both the heritage of our past and the light of hope within this congregation today. Our chalice lighting words this morning are by the Reverend Maureen Killoran. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement, that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first to the response of love. Okay, I practiced and I was doing it correctly earlier. Oh, shoot. There we go.
See it, and the dog's telling us about it. Our chalice lighting song today is Be the Light by Leah Morris.
There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to be it.
Okay.
To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to see it. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. To see the light, to be the light, to shine the dark of night and be a climb this hill. Together we will. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. Be the light.
Please join me in reciting our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. And our time for all ages today will be presented by our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Nikki Kennedy.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see me. I am coming to you live from my house today to share with you a story that I found. It's more of an anecdote that I found really appropriate for today's service. And I want to read it with you. Sorry, I just closed the wrong window. So, So our time for all ages comes to us today from the Buddhist tradition. It's from a very popular book that was published in the 50s, and a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And this particular story is actually more of an anecdote, and it's called A Cup of Tea. There was a Japanese master. His name was Nanen, and he welcomed a university professor. This professor came to stay with him to learn about Zen. Nanen served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full. And the tea smelled wonderful. And he kept pouring. And he kept pouring. And he kept pouring. And he kept pouring, and the cup continued to overflow till the professor could no longer restrain himself. And he said, "Why do you keep pouring? Nothing else is going to fit into this cup." And Nanen said, "You are full of your own opinions and speculations. And how can I show you Zen unless you empty your cup first?" This cup, of course, represents our own fixed beliefs, which we all see our reality from. It's hard to see and to learn deep teachings because our minds are already so full. So when we have an empty mind, we can be curious. We can actually hear others, and we can be present without a barrier. Emptying our minds allows us to become receptive and let in new ideas. So that's what we're talking about today, emptying our cups so that we can be receptive to new ideas. May it be so, friends. May it be so.
Thank you, Nikki. Our joys and concerns will be shared today by Christina Sellers, a representative of the pastoral care team.
Good morning. All right, am I here? As we share our joys with others, those joys are multiplied. When other hearts know our joy shines all the brighter. As we share our concerns, our community can offer its care. When other hearts know our sorrow, our burden becomes lighter. This is the time in our service when we offer witness and support for one another's journeys. Please post in the chat if you have a joy or concern you would like to share with everyone today and those who will watch the recording later. Joys and concerns can be submitted at any time via email to the pastoral care team or through the web form located on the care and support page of the church's website. This week's joys and concerns, well, this was a week full of concerns and joys for so many people. Let's see here. We didn't have any officially submitted, but it was extremely concerning that the state's infrastructure crumbled under cold temperatures and left people without heat in the coldest days we've had. And it was a joy to see people coming together to help each other out and to try and do their best to take care of their neighbors. We have a concern from Pete Meter. Beverly arrived in Germany Saturday morning to be with her daughter Liz. Okay, guys, there's a cat at my house and it's very exciting to the kids. All right, guys. So we can't talk about the cat right now. We'll do it in a little bit, okay? There's a cat in our backyard. I'm going to start over again on that concern. Beverly arrived in Germany Saturday morning to be with her daughter Liz. Liz is under palliative care because of her terminal liver cancer. I'm so glad she made it there, Pete. I'm so sorry for the circumstances. We have a concern from Leondar-Wright for all those affected by the winter storm. From Janelle, the joy that so many reached out to help each other in our church last week. From Kim, it was a joy to be a member of a wonderful community at Westside who really came together in yet another crisis. I love this community. From Amy, we have a concern for those who still don't have water or electricity, also for folks for whom that is a normal part of life. From Lauren, licensing joy, the license have power again after 60 hours and pipes repaired after a week with no water. All right, from Leondar-Wright, we have a joy for Biden for starting federal relief. From Cindy, a joy that Daryl Sellers drove to a member's house to check on them. He did. From Lauren, Lysing, another joy, all the help offered from others. From Sharon, my deepest thanks and appreciation to Kim, Nikki, and Spencer for rescuing me from my snowbound and frigid home on Tuesday, and to Rita for taking me in until my power returned, and Myrtle, who also offered me shelter. So glad you're safe and warm now, Sharon. Thank you all for sharing those with us. It is good to share with one another as sharing draws our community closer. Please know that our pastoral care associates are available to support you with deep listening and when needed through our InReach Fund for short-term financial support of members in need. We are here for you.
Thank you, Christina. This morning's centering song is number 132, Our World is One World, performed by Michael Tacey.
On the wings of this music, I invite you to join me in a time of centering. Each week at Westside, we open our hearts to those in our community who know both joys and challenges, and to all suffering beings. I will begin with a brief introduction before we move into a time for silent reflection. At that point, I will ring the bell to signal the start of the time for your own meditation, prayer, or reflection, and I will ring the bell at the end. I invite you to close your eyes and check the alignment of your spine as I begin. Spirit of life and love and hope. Let our hearts be full of love and excitement as we share in the joys among this community. And let our spirits reach out in compassion to all who know sorrow as well. Offering a loving presence to those in pain, whether spoken or too painful to share. And we especially keep in our thoughts all those who are suffering due to the winter storm that struck us and the failure of our infrastructure. Remind us of our connection to each other, and may that connection bring us great peace. May it be so, blessed be, and amen.
West Side Service Project for February is the Texas UU Justice Ministry. Texas UU Justice Ministry is made up of Texas UU congregations working together alongside other organizations to advocate for public policies that reflect our Unitarian Universalist values, which include justice, compassion, and equity. At Texas legislative sessions, Westside congregants and other UUs have converged at the Capitol to advocate for issues that we value: immigrant, reproductive, and racial justice, for example. As a member church of Texas UU Justice Ministry, dues are only $2 per member. The dues and donations beyond membership enable staff and volunteers to testify at the Capitol and other venues on issues such as testifying against a bill that would have licensed for-profit prisons to be child care facilities in the detention of families and children seeking asylum in the U.S. Please contribute to help Unitarian Universalism maintain a visible, justice-seeking presence in Texas. You can give online through the church's giving page, and you'll see the link in the order of service in the chat, or by using the Give Plus app. Just select the Service Project Fund. Thank you so much for your offering, and please enjoy this musical offering from our very talented pianist, Yuki Kumamoto.
Thank you again for your generosity. Our reflection this morning is by Betsy Leondar-Wright, a UU Class Conversations co-founder. The sermon has been offered as part of Embracing Class Sunday and is entitled, "What Would a Class Inclusive Congregation Look Like?" Member Jeff Rodriguez will start us off with a reading.
Good morning, everyone. This reading is entitled Cabbage Town, and it was written by the Reverend Karen Hutt. My mom said it would be a short drive to my cousin's house because she would take a shortcut through Cabbage Town just outside Atlanta. As I looked out the window, searching for cabbages along the highway, instead I saw long row homes on sandy red clay. I saw an old mill and lots of old cars, and men milling about and women standing around them, and children playing in red dirt. That was the first time I laid eyes on these kind of people, and my curiosity kept my head pressed against the window in the back seat. It was late, and my dad was finishing up work at his office in Philadelphia, downtown. A man came up to him on Broad Street. He had tousled blonde hair and asked my dad if he could spare some change. I was stunned that this man was asking my father for money. I stared at my father, very disappointed, and mostly disappointed at my dad because as he gave him the loose change in his pocket that I had begged for just an hour earlier. As the man walked away, I stared at him curiously, wondering, why is this man a beggar? My great-grandfather, whose father was an enslaved person, liked to tell stories. And one day he was telling us a story about something, and he looked to all the other adults in the room and said, well, you know, they ain't nothing but poor white trash. And everybody chuckled, and I laughed hard along, even though I didn't know what I was laughing at until years later in South Boston. There I was working with a white youth living in public housing. One afternoon, I went into the home of one of the kids who was having a tough time because I wanted to meet his mother. The mom welcomed me in and directed me to sit down. I looked down and saw that I was about to sit on the whole front seat of a Ford Mustang that was serving as the couch. I sat down very carefully, as if traveling in a foreign land, waiting for some type of social cue. Should I sit a certain way in this chair, this couch that I had never seen? How should I guide my moves in the strange place where I had landed? These were the people I brushed up against, drove by, heard about, wondered about. These were the other white people. These were the white people that I and everyone around me had nothing but disdain for. They were the butt of our jokes as we watched the Beverly Hillbillies and Hee Haw as kids. Later on, they morphed into Honey Boo Boo and Duck Dynasty, and they became sort of the pop culture junk food for my friends and me as we drank craft beer at our art openings. This was one group of people that my upper middle class friends and I could all agree on. We were better than them.
Last spring, I was invited by the Social Justice Committee at my church, First Parish in Arlington, Massachusetts, to give an annual social justice sermon in memory of the late member Barbara Shin. And in my sermon, I talked about classism, and in particular about classism in UU congregations. Here's what I told them. I want to tell you about something that my nonprofit Class Action does every year right around New Year's. We hold a contest for the most class-offensive comment of a public figure in the prior year. So we get people to nominate comments, And then we get people to vote on which comment has the most classism, meaning prejudice and mistreatment based on social class. So last year, the winner was this little gem from a Silicon Valley CEO. He wrote on Facebook, quote, "Why the heart of our city has to be overrun by crazy, homeless, drug dealers, dropouts, and trash, I have no clue. In other cosmopolitan cities, the lower part of society keep to themselves. They realize it's a privilege to be in the civilized part of town, and they view themselves as guests. But in downtown San Francisco, the degenerates gather like hyenas." Unquote. So dehumanizing, so demeaning. And 2 years before that, Newt Gingrich won for calling child labor laws stupid and advocating firing school janitors and having poor kids clean the schools. That kind of classist talk should be a scandal. It should get a person fired, like when Paula Deen used the N-word and then Walmart cut ties with her, and then she staged a, quote, plantation dinner with black servers playing the part of slaves, and the Food Network canceled her show. Good for them. That's what should happen with any hate speech, by race, by gender, or by class. There should be an anti-defamation league for class. And that's one thing class action is trying to do. Make it a scandal when anyone is demeaning or dehumanizing to poor people or working class people. So when we say that publicly, that that's our goal, some people ask class action, are you saying that if only people treated each other better, poverty and inequality wouldn't matter? You just want people to be nice to each other? No, of course that's not what we're saying. Verbal classism and stereotypes are the insults that justify the injury. In UU class conversations workshops at UU churches, we ask participants to come up with the classist and/or racist myths and stereotypes that are used to justify particular harmful policies. And everyone can generate a list. For example, to justify why the feds bailed out the banks and not the homeowners during the financial crash. People say, oh, those dumb borrowers, they all borrowed more than they could afford to, it's their fault. Or to justify why the rules of welfare were changed so that education and training don't count towards the work requirement in Massachusetts and many other states. People would say, you know, those poor women, they're lazy, they have to be forced to get a work ethic. So you see, classist myths are the justifications for policies that widen the wealth gap and widen the income gap. So class action's vision is a world without classism, where yes, everyone would be treated with respect, but also everyone's basic needs would be met. This is the same vision as the UU principles, a world that respects the inherent worth and dignity of every person, a world that manifests justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and bringing about justice in the world. But that's not the world we're living in, and that's not the world that any of us grew up in. Our experience as children was vastly different, depending on our parents' education, the neighborhood we grew up in, the schools we went to. Our class background shaped us. We see the world differently. We handle situations differently depending on our class background. And of course we can grow and change, but our childhood class background will always be where we started from. And each class background gives us distinct strengths and limitations. Speaking for myself, my sheltered upper middle class background limited how much I could understand how this economy works. It took some savvy working class and poor activists to open my eyes. But the classist view is that middle class and wealthy people are the ideal to which everyone should aspire, just one big bundle of assets. And working class and poor people are nothing but a bundle of deficits. Not just that working class and poor people need more money and opportunity, which of course is true, but as if they also need to change as people to become more culturally like middle class people. It's really easy for us to think of these classist views coming from politicians, CEOs, Fox News commentators, but it's not just them, it's us. It's much harder to recognize classism in ourselves, or in people we love, or in social justice groups, or within UU congregations. When the UU Class Conversations Project did a workshop on classism at GA last year. It was a room for 50 that was packed with over 100 people. There were hands waving in the air as people wanted to be called on. And there were many positive examples given of how UU churches are class inclusive, but many examples of organizational classism. And many of the people there self-identified as working class or poor UUs, who are more numerous than most people realize. UUs are disproportionately highly educated and likely to hold professional or managerial positions compared with the whole US population, but that average hides a lot of variation. We are a class-diverse denomination. So of the 100 or more answers we got to the question, what problems do you see indicating that UUs need greater awareness of class? Let me start with one quote someone heard at their church. Quote, "People in that poor neighborhood nearby won't be interested in us, and they won't help solve our budget problems even if they are." Okay, I'm going to unpack that statement in 3 parts. So first, people in that poor neighborhood won't be interested in us. There's an assumption there about who we are, as if there's no working class or poor UUs, as if no one is struggling financially. We seem to be missing the class differences among us. The assumptions that there's no class diversity lead to invisible walls. For example, newsletters that go out only by email, because assuming that everyone has internet, like not having childcare at events, like requiring fees for religious education with no scholarships. There was one story was told about a church that required choir members to buy their own robes, so somebody was unable to join and sing. So assuming that there's no class diversity also leads to shaming working class and poor members. And 2 rituals in particular were brought up again and again. One was the bridging ceremony for 18-year-olds, the assumption everyone's going to college. Sometimes it's even asked to announce where you're going to college. And some teens stayed away because they didn't want to name a public or community college or because they weren't going to college. And the other ritual that was named over and over again was the water ceremony at the end of the summer. Somebody called it a travelogue. Somebody else called it a brag fest. In most churches, individuals name the vacation spots where they got the water. I like it much better how we do it here at First Parish. The service leaders read everyone's card where they wrote the location that they got their water from. So the locations are anonymous, and the water can be from any meaningful source, including the garden hose or the hospital waiting room. So the second set of assumptions in that quote, people in that poor neighborhood won't be interested in us, second set of assumptions is about who they are, as if people in that poor neighborhood would all think alike. So the criticizing the us-them frame instead of a mutual collaboration frame. When the church works with the wider community, is that seen as charity, us giving to you, or is it seen as social justice work? Some churches did report great relationships with low-income communities, and some actively advocated for economic justice legislation, but others were reported to be helping the poor in a patronizing way. And when people from low-income communities were invited in, there were stories of them being socially snubbed. 2 people at GA talked about homeless people being invited to a service or an event and then being socially avoided, or a visitor from a low-income group being asked, "What do you do for a living?" at coffee hour. So then remember the second part of that quote was that the people in the poor neighborhood wouldn't help our budget problem even if they did join. So there's another aspect of classism, which is overvaluing financial contributions. We're all supposed to give of our time, our talent, and our treasure. But sometimes there's too much emphasis on the money donations. Some churches have a minimum contribution to join, so some people are excluded. And many people talked about the honors given to the highest donors. One church actually had a dinner served to the highest donors, and that was cooked and served by other members. So the assumption in there that the bigger pledge means caring about the church more, instead of stretching to an amount that's big for you, being the marker of putting in your treasure. So the good news is that the whole UU denomination has chosen to study and act on the topic of escalating inequality for 4 years in a row. And this focus is not only on inequality in the wider society, but it also includes class issues in our congregations. So we've been invited to take a journey of change. And what is this journey of change going to look like? Let me tell you a story from my own experience with another organization that tackled class issues in a comprehensive way. This is the story of how class came to be the focus of my organizing, writing, and teaching for all these years. I was a member of Movement for a New Society, a national network of social justice activists that I joined when I was 21 years old. And I joined right when members from working class backgrounds or poverty found each other, compared notes, and started speaking up. They did speak outs in which those of us from more privileged class backgrounds, like me, listened while they revealed their childhood hardships and their adult financial struggles, and they raged about the classism that they saw in the organization. And these speak outs were imprinted on my heart. And the Working Class and Poor Caucus became an empowered and vocal subset within Movement for a New Society. And once we had this focus on class in our lives and class in our organizations, so many things changed. We began incorporating class caucuses into all our retreats, and we included classes and workshops in all our training programs. We created a mutual aid fund so that people who had more could put money in and people who had crises could take money out. We created a kind of radical sliding scale for paying for our events that took into account all aspects of people's lives, called cost sharing. And more subtly, the presence of so many empowered working class and poor members changed our internal culture. Their more blunt speech and their more raucous humor livened things up. And their cultural strengths of toughness and resilience became resources for our social justice work. And because the working class and poor members had more ties to low-income neighborhoods and communities of color, we could draw on their networks to build cross-class alliances. So from that story that I saw with my own eyes, I can foresee the journey of change that First Parish and the whole UU denomination will go on as we tackle class and classism. The first step is to talk honestly about our class life stories. I know there are class secrets in this room because there are class secrets in every room. Many of us know how to talk about class out there in the economy, but we rarely talk about it in our own lives or in our own congregations or our social justice partnerships. What will happen when we get our class secrets out in the open and when we do an honest audit of class and classism at First Parish? Over and over, I've seen the power of sharing class life experiences to unleash an organizational change, that surge of energy that you get for transforming your culture and your work. The invisible walls blocking inclusion come tumbling down. There's money dammed up with individuals that gets released and pooled and used for the collective good. The circle of community widens. The borders of the community become more porous. And it becomes clearer how to work for structural change once you have relationships with community groups run by people actually affected by the problems. So here at First Parish, we can build on what we already do well. The ways that we prevent money from being a barrier to anyone. We already started the discussion by having UU Class Conversations workshops. Some First Parish social justice committees have already built strong cross-class and cross-race collaborations, like hats off to the diversity and inclusion groups' relationships with immigrant groups, and hats off to the mass incarceration groups' relationships with groups of inmates and former inmates. But I can see us taking it further, using the inspiration of the Escalating Inequality Study Action Focus, using all the resources in the pipeline from the UUA to study economic injustice and to act to end it. Thanks to the initiative of the Class Conversations Project, we can do more workshops and study groups on reducing UU classism, so we can take our internal class awareness further. I can see us taking it further to make the first UU principle not just an aspiration, but a lived reality in our community and in the world? What would it mean to really act on the reality of the inherent worth and dignity of every person with no exceptions? I can see us taking it further to bring alive in our relationships with each other the words we so often say in our benediction, the love of the sacred in one another. I can see us taking it further to tune into the spirit immanent in this room, to tune into the spirit that calls us to reach out with love, to tune into the spirit that calls us to greater oneness with all of humanity.
Our closing hymn this morning is number 1017. We Are Building a New Way, performed by the Unitarian Universalist Society of Grafton and Upton. Enjoy.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. A new way, a new way, a new way.
It was a great arrangement. Hope you enjoyed that. Our closing words are from the United Nations Earth Charter. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life, the firm resolve to achieve sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and the joyful celebration of life. And now join me in the congregational closing as we extinguish our chalices. Let us go in peace, believe in peace, and create peace in our lives and in the world.